Shinji Ikari, the Messiah. And indeed, he is the Messiah. That is kind of the essence, I think, of Shinji's character. That he is a messianic figure, that he is the savior of humanity. And I think people don't really understand him, and I think a lot of the hate for him comes from the lack of understanding. I, for my part, have always loved Shinji. He's probably my favorite anime character, and he's been my favorite anime character since 12 years ago, when I was 12 years old in grade 8, downloading Evangelion on with my 1 kilobyte a second crappy Kazaa torrents. And as soon as I started watching it, I immediately loved Shinji. I don't really understand why people. Well, no, I do understand why people hate him, and I will go into detail about that. Shinji Ikari, the essence of his character is he is the Messiah. I mean, if you look at the series and you go back and you look at all the angel fights, etc., Shinji pretty much could have taken them all on by himself. And in many cases, he did take them on by himself. Guided by the spirit of Yui, he and the near omnipotence of Unit 1, the other EVA pilots were not even really necessary. He probably could have done it all himself rather handily. Um, he was born, or fate conspired to give him by far the best piloting skills. Even despite Asuka's extensive training and hard work, she could just never come close to rivaling Shinji's abilities. So that being said, what makes Shinji interesting is that he's a man, and he's only a man. He is a messiah who is fully human. Now, most messianic figures, from Gilgamesh to Mithra to Christ, tend to have a human and a divine nature. Um, in Christianity, we refer to Christ as having two natures, one fully human and one fully divine. He was fully God, but also fully a human being, and he experienced the fullness of both. Now, this is very significant because with the role of being a Messiah comes a lot of unpleasant things. Christ obviously was crucified. Well, to go from the Apostles' Creed, he died, crucified, buried, descended into hell, fought a bunch of demons in hell to save souls there, and on the third day he rose from the dead and ascended into heaven. And he knew all of that was going to happen because he was God. And not to take anything away from his suffering, but the cross was easier to bear because he was God. And because he knew from before he was born, before the universe existed, what it was he would do and what the ultimate outcome would be. So despite the horrors of being the Messiah, he was able to bear it, as indeed all messiahs, or most messianic figures are throughout history, because they tend to have a divine nature as well, and if not a divine nature, a patrician nature like Batman. They have something about them that sets them above other humans. Shinji is set only above other humans by being the Messiah, and in other aspects he is a normal man. Less than that, he is a child. He is only 14 years old and completely lacking in stable adult influences. Shinji has no positive male influences in his life. He is merely a child who is forced to become the Messiah for all of humanity, and he is largely played realistically at that. And that is the reason why he is hated. Because he's not a godlike figure. He is an ordinary man who is entrusted with godlike powers, and he handles it in an ordinary way. And that's why people hate him, because he's not a superhuman like figure like Lelouch, or a mythic figure like Zelda or Link, or a trained warrior like Samus Aran. He's just a normal kid who has been given the role of Messiah, and eventually is given the role of basically godhood. And that is kind of the essence of his character. And I don't think people understand that. I think they expect him to be like all the other messiahs, like all the other anime characters who have a divine nature. And even if their character isn't formally a god, they will have unrealistic levels of courage, of power, of confidence in oneself. And that enables them to keep fighting even after everything else has been taken away from them. Shinji's not like that. He's a normal human being. And I think people misunderstand what his ultimate flaw is. Shinji is not really a coward. I think people misinterpret a lack of confidence and cowardice. They are for being the same thing. They aren't the same thing. Shinji's problem is that he hates himself and he doesn't believe in himself. And more than not believing in himself, he believes that he is a bad person, that he's evil, that he's wicked, that he's cowardly, even though in reality he really isn't. He is in his own way a kind person, a brave person, and a passionate person. He is just hampered in this and his role as the Messiah by having no sense of belief in himself. If you look at the series, Shinji is the only pilot who is still operational by the time of End of Evangelion. All the others died or had complete breakdowns and became basket cases. So people call him a coward, people say he runs away from his problems. But being the guy who shows up at the end of the show and kills Kwaru means he didn't run away. He was the only one who was still there in End to Evangelion. And he may have had a lot of trouble with it. He may have wanted to quit. He may have wanted to leave, but he didn't. Um, being there till the end means that you didn't run away. And his core problem, as I said, is not really a lack of courage. If we look at the times he ran away, it tended to be after people yelled at him and told him that he sucked. Like I believe in episode 3 or 4 when he goes on his big walk to find himself, Misato basically screams at him, not for being a coward, but for actually being reckless. Because he recklessly put himself in danger, and when she got angry at him for putting himself in danger, he basically just said, "My life doesn't matter." Um, and I think Shinji, to some extent, another reason people hate him is he doesn't self-promote. I think it's fairly obvious he does care about other people, and that his reason for piloting Eva is largely because he does care for other people, because he does want to save the world in his own way. I just think he, to some extent, won't admit that out loud or admit that to other people because he has such a low opinion of himself, and thus a low opinion of his motives. If we look at some other times, he almost leaves because, well, he's rendered obsolete. The dummy plug system used by his father kills Toji, um, which is to some extent his own failing, because if he had have tried to fight and tried to save Toji, he probably would have been able to spare Toji the pain of having his arm and leg ripped off. But also he just wasn't necessary anymore, and the dummy plug seemed to do a better job. So he didn't really leave because of cowardice that time. He left because he had a moral objection to his father, and because he didn't think he was necessary anymore. Also, he didn't think that Shinji couldn't comprehend that he mattered to people, that he mattered to Misato, that Asuka and Rei had feelings for him because of how low his opinion of himself was. Um, so it's not really cowardice. Even in End to Evangelion, where people say he was crying and being and cowering, I don't really think it was cowardice. I think it was more or less um, having to kill the only person who ever really told him that they loved him, plus his what he perceived as his failures to help Asuka, Misato, save Kaji, and do everything else. That the guilt had just overwhelmed him, and he just didn't had so little self-confidence left that he could make anything better. He just thought it was better if he didn't even try anymore, because his trying only seemed to make things worse. And despite beating all the angels, it didn't save Nerve, and it didn't save the people he cared about. So, to my extent, Shinji's failings are being human, of being a fully human person, um, and not having that divine nature or that epic heroic quality that a lot of protagonists have. But I did find him a brave character. I found him a compassionate character. I found him a kind character. I found him a good character, just not in a superhuman sense. I think there's an old expression: "A fool knows no fear, a hero shows none," and I do think Shinji Ikari is a hero. Um, he is just what to some extent he kind of reminds me of the saints in Catholicism, who are people who are not, while they're alive, at least graced with the divine nature. They are ordinary people who become heroes in generally in ordinary ways, um, by showing courage, by showing faith, by showing compassion for others. And they often sin and fall short, and they aren't perfect, because none of us are perfect. None of us who lack a divine nature are perfect. But to some extent, um, that's just the way we are. And I think that's one of the ultimate messages of Evangelion, is that there is beauty in the real world along with the horrors. There is meaning in life and existence, no matter how painful it is. And even if you lack a divine nature, I mean a divine nature in a God sense. Obviously, everyone has a soul, which is a divine nature. But even if you lack that, you can still be a hero. You can still be a messianic figure, as it were. So I might do a couple videos on Shinji, maybe one about relationships and stuff like that. But that's just kind of a basic background as to what I think the essence of his character is. So I hope you enjoy it, and I'll do some more. This is Argent Templar signing out.